Welcome back. Time for our GMC Sierra Tweet of the Night. Comes from MLB Pipeline. Paul Skeens dialed it up to 101 in his pro debut. The number one overall pick spun a 1-2-3 inning for the FCL Pirates. That was the story for Paul Skeens. 11 pitches, Chris Mueller, 8 strikes, sat between 99 and 101 with the fastball. Of those 11 pitches, only one of them, Chris, was slower than 99 miles an hour. He definitely showed off the arm, and that 89-mile-an-hour pitch was probably an off-speed pitch, clearly. But Paul Skeens on that road, how soon we see him in Pittsburgh, no one really knows. But at least, if nothing else, Chris, at least the journey to Pittsburgh has begun.
I'm glad he's throwing this year. You'll remember Garrett Cole, I believe, did not throw any official innings whatsoever. He didn't throw for the Pirates. He first, I think, got action in the Arizona Fall League, which is technically not affiliated. You know, like, it doesn't count as minor league ball. So I'm glad Skeens has thrown an inning. He's probably going to throw a handful more, Josh, I would think. Maybe a couple more appearances. That would hopefully put him on a fast track. You would think Ben Cherington, having said recently that there's an urgency to win, which is something sort of out of the ordinary for him, you'd think he would want to fast-track Skeens. But if this team gets off to a spotty start next year and they don't look like a serious contender, then I think you would agree with me, right? They're not going to feel any urgency to bring him up prior to Super 2 if the team isn't in the hunt. And it's not quite a worst-case scenario, but it's definitely close to it when it comes to his arrival in the big leagues.
I think that's fair. This is one of those things. I know people love to complain about the Pirates in Super 2. Folks, every team in MLB does this. Every single team does it. The Rays were one of the exceptions when they brought up Evan Longoria. He was a rarity. There was a time, Chris, when the Cubs didn't bring up Chris Bryant and Scott Boras was upset about it. But I agree with you on that particular aspect of it. If we're going to see Paul Skeens next season, there has to be something for them to play for. There has to be something for him to pitch for. And if there's not, they will probably take their time and say, hey, look, we'll save him and use our bullets on a better date, so to speak. But, yeah, I agree with that. If they're going to do anything next season, he probably has to be a part of it. And if it gets to that point where they don't think he can be a part of it, then they probably put him on ice for the time being, or at least keep him in the minors until they feel like he is ready to contribute. 412-575-2600 on the Bordas and Bordas hotline. Let's start with Chuck in Uniontown since we're talking Pirates. Chuck, you're on the Nightly Sports Call. Oh, I think we lost Chuck. I'm sorry, Chuck. I'm sorry. Chuck is a legend for a reason. Let's go to Jimmy in Point Breeze. Jimmy, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Yo, Josh, can you hear me?
I can. Thank you for being awake, too. Appreciate that.
Josh, my man. Love you. Love what you do with the show. You're the best.
Thank you, sir.
My question is, what do you guys think the Pens are going to do with the bottom 6 forwards?
My first answer to that is, Chris, I think that's why they brought in Lars Eller, which is one of the moves I actually liked silently. Not super excited about, but I thought it was a useful move because I think he's a guy who can be efficient on your bottom two lines. That was a move that I liked. As far as the rest of it, I'm still one of those guys that wants to see Drew O'Connor, whether it's on the third line or on the fourth line. He seems to be one of those guys that will do whatever Mike Sullivan tells him to do. But as far as the rest of it, Chris, I think there's a lot that still needs to be worked out. I know there's people that are wondering if that's going to involve Jeff Carter, and they probably cringe when they have that discussion. But that's where I am as far as some of the guys they brought in and some of those free agents being able to contribute to that pool, so to speak.
What they decide to do with Riley Smith and how they want to deploy him probably matters, although I think he can play second. He can play top six. He can play third line. Depends on what you want from him. But I think here's a novel suggestion. You just acquired probably the defenseman who drives play the best of anybody in the entire league. It's been said that part of Sidney Crosby's success is that he's been tied to Chris Letang, kind of stapled to him. They go out on the ice together a lot.
Right.
Maybe you put Erik Karlsson out there more often with your third line or with bottom six, especially your third line, though, Josh, and then they get a de facto – he's the best offensive player on the ice, basically, even though he's a defenseman for you. Then you maybe use that to artificially goose an otherwise maybe tepid line or an underwhelming line offensively. I think that's something that Mike Sullivan has to at least consider, as an arrow in his quiver this year.
Especially considering the fact that these two guys, I mean, we know Chris Letang is just an absolute warrior when it comes to minutes that he plays, but so is Erik Karlsson. they got to divvy up the minutes somehow. One can't be on the ice the entire time. So it does create that opportunity that you're talking about to give Erik Karlsson one of those large swaths of minutes. If he's going to play with the bottom six, it's probably a good place for him to do it. And it really benefits both the coaching staff and Erik Karlsson at the same time in doing so. Let's go to Ray in Whitehall. Ray, you're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Yeah, I was just wondering about this NIL because I'm concerned that if the top football teams leave the ACC and it dissolves, obviously the football
They can't leave
program,
the ACC, Ray.
Right away.
There's a guarantee of rights that makes it so that for, I think, 14 years, if anybody leaves, they cannot get the new television revenues from their new conference. That is as poisonous a poison pill as you will ever see written into one of these contracts. So Florida State can pound their feet and stomp their feet and be the petulant kid at the table. It's ironclad, baby. They got to stay.
That goes for Clemson, too, because there could be a time when the SEC gets a wandering eye and might want to lure Dabo Swinney on over, and there's no profit in it for Clemson if they do that. And that's one of the things. That might be the one thing that keeps the ACC at least together. Here's another thing. And if you're the ACC, you might want to be a little bit more proactive than this. And I'm not talking about specifically Cal or Stanford, but if there's other opportunities to pull someone else into that conference, you might want to look into it. But Cal and Stanford, Chris, those aren't the options I'm thinking about at the moment. I'm kind of almost relieved that this might not be a thing.
I mean, it might not be a thing today, Josh, but you follow it the same way I do. If somebody comes back around or circles back around or the ACC gets desperate enough and feels like it needs to add more schools, they'd consider it. I mean, travel's already going to be a nightmare with the Big Ten having 4 teams on the Pacific Coast. The real domino here that'll just never, ever fall is Notre Dame.
Yep.
They want all that TV money from NBC to themselves. They want to dictate terms. Get a load of what Jack Swarbrick trying to tell other schools like what conferences what to do. Hey, buddy, staple your mouth shut unless you want to play like the rest of everybody. Stop trying to verbally move pieces on the chessboard to fit your own interests. Be quiet.
It's so ironic to have A, Jack Swarbrick saying things like that, and B, with Notre Dame holding as much power as they do within the ACC without being in the ACC, it's like a really bad common law marriage. I still don't know how that works, but yeah, it's if there's anything the ACC is going to do to try to figure this out, that would be the move. But I'm with you. I think Notre Dame is looking at that NBC
Josh.
money and they're like,
They're just it's never going to happen. And as long as they can get NBC to fork over the money. We could all hate it and say you haven't been the team you think you are, the program you think you are in 30 years or so, but the money talks and the you-know-what walks in this situation.
Yeah, the deciding factor will not be the ACC. It will be NBC. If they decide to lowball Notre Dame, then that might be the thing that makes the difference. We got to take another break. We'll wrap up when we come back. Stick around.